Greetings, happy people, and welcome back to another episode of Affinity 10. My name is Nick with TDG. First and foremost, I would like to apologize, as I realize it's been roughly 2 to 3 weeks since I uploaded the last video for this video series, and in the coming weeks, I'll do my best to release at least 1 to 2 videos a week as we continue to work through this project. And I guess to give you kind of an idea of where I'm going with this project, I am starting to dive into the world of digital art, more particularly into landscape painting and digital painting. I was a big Bob Ross fan growing up, and I'm going to try to do some digital painting. So that'll be the artwork that I'll be inserting into these. And you'll probably get a good laugh out of it, if nothing else, because I'm just beginning and learning as we go, just like everybody learns. And some of the stuff does not look like happy trees or happy little clouds. Let's just say that. Looking at our document, and once again, this will be a mostly unedited video outside of the Toby tip. And speaking of Toby, here's Toby now. Toby would like to remind us that while it's not essential to set up your style guides on a master page level or on a spread layout, it does make it easier for yourself as a designer to see how your typefaces work together, and also to present that to a client if you're working with a client on the project. Right now we're looking at master page B, and to quickly go through these that we set up in the last video, we have our base style, we have our header 1 style, we have our header 1 serif style, and we set up some base indent left justify text that we then split into 2 columns and 3 columns to see how that type would look. Now, after I had left off in the last video, which is the lovely part of being live, I realized I forgot to set up some hyphenation options for our justify text. And this can also help if you go into maybe 4 columns. It'll help keep the text from breaking up quite so much. Or maybe you just want to have hyphenation used in some parts and not in other parts. That's particularly up to you as a designer when you're creating your layout. So we'll jump straight into it by setting up our hyphenation styles. I'm going to quickly duplicate our base style here by holding down Shift and Alt and dragging down. And from our last video, the one thing I did do before starting this video was I cleaned up these frames a little bit by just simply shrinking them up to make more room. So that's the only change that I really made, just so we have some more space over here to work with when creating our other styles. So to jump into our hyphenation, I'm going to go over here to our base left indent justified. I'm going to click on the hamburger icon over here on the right, and I'm going to choose to duplicate this style. Now, anytime you duplicate a style, it's going to put probably a number on the end of it. So in this case, I put a number 1. I want to change this to be hyphen, just so that I know that this is the hyphen style of the justified text. Now, depending on where you left off at in a previous project, that's what will be highlighted most likely in this left column. We are going to go ahead and choose hyphenation. And I want to make sure I go ahead and check mark hyphenation. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that a couple times to enable the hyphenation. And we'll work through some of these options. Now, once again, I like to give a disclaimer. These are the starting points I like to use. Depending on your typeface, you may have to modify these ever so slightly for your particular project, but this will at least give you a good starting foundation for your project. So to work through the minimum word length, I would like to be that, set to 5. Going down to the prefix, I would like to change that to be 4. For the minimum suffix, I'd like that to be 3. And for the hyphenation zone, I would like this to be set to 0.5 inches. Then we have our hyphenation set up. So there's nothing else that we have to do in this instance. If you do want to make the style based on something, like right now this is based on base, I do want this to be based on left justified. That way, if we do change the left justified body copy, then this style will update automatically as well. So I just want to make sure if I go down here to hyphenation, that hyphenation is still enabled and everything looks good. And we go ahead and say OK. Now we can test this, and you're probably saying there's no hyphen showing up, which right now you can see it's just set on left justified. We want to make sure we have it set on left justified hyphen. And it may not necessarily show a hyphen. We have this pretty well optimized in our last video of setting up our justification settings. So you can try to scroll this up and down to see if you can get a hyphenation to show up. If it doesn't, don't panic, but here we can see a hyphen show up as I shrink this down a little bit more. Now you may get more hyphens depending on the typography you're using and the typeface and what you set up in your document. But if you're following along with me, you should get a hyphen to show up at some point. when you're shrinking down your text frame. So there we have our hyphen set up properly. So now we can start working through some of these other styles that we have to do. I would like to also set up a header 2 option. So we have our header 1s here, and I can see it needing an instance of at least another header in our document. So I'm going to quickly duplicate this over here to the right by once again holding down Shift and Alt and dragging it over. And for header 1, since this is our header 1, I'll just go ahead and quickly duplicate that style. So we'll duplicate it. And it's going to go ahead and make it header 2, which is fine in this instance. And for hyphenation, of course, we don't have this enabled. You can enable hyphens on headers. I typically don't. Very rare instances will I put a hyphen in a header, but typically that's a big no for me when I'm setting up headers is to hyphenate headers. So we'll scroll through our options here for our header 2. The first thing I would like to do is make the text obviously a little bit smaller. We'll come here to the font, and I'm going to change this down to 24 points, so basically half of 48. And in order to see these changes, we have to make sure we click on Apply Style to Selection. So we'll click on that, and now we can see the options highlight in real time. So naturally, our leading is going to be a little bit too wide here since we dropped the font down in size. So we're going to go down to our spacing, and we had that set to 48 point. I'm going to go ahead and drop this down to 24 to match the font size, and that's looking much better. Now, for header 2, I don't want there to be an underscore of the header like we have for header 1. I like to make that stay for header 1, but not have that in header 2. So we'll continue to work down here to our decorations, and I'm going to turn off or disable the underline that we had for header 1. So there we have our header 2 set up. I can go ahead and click on OK. Well, actually, let me take a step back out of Love Live. Let's go up here to spacing, and just to be on the safe side, I'm going to add a 12-point spacing after this style. And this is more or less setting up and beginning to set up the foundation for chaining our styles together, where we can go straight from one style into the next style, into the next style, and make our styles very efficient when working through it. Now, we may come back and adjust this later. I'm sure we probably will, but let's go ahead and use this as a starting point. And we'll say OK. Now, I also want to have another version of this header, just like we have for header 1. I also want to have a serif version of this header. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this down. And let me get my selection tool here, come over here to header 2, and we'll duplicate header 2. And I don't want this to be header 3. I want this to be header 2 serif. And the only change we're going to make on this is, you guessed it, we're going to go up and change our font to be a serif font. And what we're using in this one is Source Serif Pro. So let me find Source Serif Pro in our list here. Click on that. We will click Apply to Selection. And there we have our alternate header created. I'll go ahead and click OK. And we made some quick adjustments here. We set up our hyphenation for our body copy. We also set up a couple more headers. Now we're going to set up a bullet section, or more or less really just a section header that I'm going to use a bullet style for. So let's go ahead and create a base style. I'm going to click on my base style. I'm going to get my text frame. And one thing I noticed with Affinity, and it's kind of weird, is you'll notice we worked on header 2 last, and even though I clicked on base initially, when I came up to click on the frame tool, it defaulted back to header 2. So just kind of be mindful of that and watch that. I'm going to go ahead and click back on base again, and we will drag out a basic text frame. We were working in 3 columns previously. I'll go ahead and drop this down to 1 column. And we will insert some filler text here. Well, actually, I'll just leave this as some typography. I'll call this section bullet. Well, actually, let me rephrase that, because if you're setting up bullets for the first time, you may not be familiar how to get bullets to align up. So let me go ahead and fill this with filler text. This might be a good instance to show you how we can do that. So I'll say insert. Where's our filler text? I'm overlooking it right there. It is. Insert filler text. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to create a bullet, basically a section header for our publication. Well, I also want to make sure that if I want to use this as a bullet list, that all the bullets line up correctly. So let's go ahead and work through that. With the base selected, I'm going to click on New Style, and I will call this Section Bullet. And working through some of the default options here for the font, I do want the font to be 12 point, so I'm going to make sure 12 point is set in here. And I do want the font weight to be bold. And continue to work through some of these options here. For the capitals, I don't think I want capitals here. We'll go ahead and leave capitals off for now, but I may come back and add capitals later. So let's go ahead and go down to our bullets and numbering options. So here's our bullets. I want to change the type to be bullet, and we have our bullet style applied, but we have some odd formatting going on. So this is where we have to try to clean this up a little bit. So for the bullet, I don't want it to actually be a bullet point. I would like it to be basically a closed bracket. So I'm going to delete that out of there and enter in our closed bracket, which is now changed over here. For the tab stop, I'm going to enter in 0.25, hit enter, and I move that over a little bit for our first line, but you'll notice we still have some other things going on where I would like this text over here to make sure it aligns underneath the bullet point if we were doing a multi-line section header, which could happen in an instance throughout this publication, so I want to make sure I have that set up correctly. So how can we fix that? Well, to fix it, I'm going to go over here to our spacing options, and I'm going to change our left indent to be 0.25. And, well, that indented it for us, which is what I do want to have happen in this instance, but it also did something else. It still moved everything over with it. Well, when I entered the left indent here, the first line indent also changed, and I don't want that first line indent to change. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to 0, and now we have our bullets aligned over here to the left, and our paragraphs are lined up perfectly to each other underneath each bullet, which is exactly what we're looking for in this instance. And I will go ahead and I think by default, I will go ahead and make this all caps. We'll just come here now and we'll make this all caps. And I think we're okay with our bullet style now. I'll go ahead and click OK. And now we have our section bullet over here selected and we're ready to continue on. Now the next item I'm going to create is going to be our captions. And I'm going to set up a couple different captions. You could do this a couple of different ways. You could have a caption align away from the spine or towards the spine. That way you can float it to the left or to the right and it will align accordingly. But sometimes I like to have my captions align to the left. Sometimes I like them to align to the right, where I might want it to align to the right on the left of the spread or to the right on the right of the spread. So I prefer just to set up two caption styles, aligning those accordingly so I have more flexibility that way versus doing it aligned to the spine, basically. So I'm going to go ahead and select my base style. I'll get my text frame. And we will draw out here our basic text frame. And we'll insert some filler text here. Once again, I'm just going to do this quickly from this menu. You can also go up to the type, or go up to the text menu, do insert filler text from there. So a couple different ways you can do that. I typically do the shortcut, but I also like to show you the menu way when you're first learning the programs. Now, one thing you'll notice here is we have all caps, and sometimes Affinity will do this where it's going to remember one of the last styles you created. And in that case, we had all caps going on some of these, and it decided it wanted to put all caps on here, even though we know our base is set as not being caps. So how can we investigate what is going on in this instance? Well, you'll notice up here in our paragraphs text styles, we have a plus next to the base. That means there's a local override going on here. So how do we figure out what that local override is? Well, we can pretty much tell that it's all caps in this instance because it's making everything all caps. Well, what you can do is if you don't have the Typography Studio opened, you click on these three dots and go ahead and make sure typography is turned on. And I'll go into the typography studio, and if I come down here to our characters, you'll notice that the all caps is highlighted. If I toggle that, it goes back to the way it should be, and you'll notice our plus icon disappeared. So that's one way you can investigate local overrides that are occurring, is coming to your typography studio and look at some of these options, particularly in the character formatting area, and make sure something wonky is not going on here with a local override. Now I'm going to go ahead and undo that and show you another way to clear that out. So let me go ahead and undo that. So once again, we have our base copy here. And I think is it going to let me undo that? Okay, there we go. So I went back a couple of times here, and now we're back to the all caps situation. So if you do have a local override showing here with a plus icon, you can simply click on the T with an arrow on it to reset that formatting, and that'll wipe it out and get you back to your base style. So now let's start setting up our caption. So I'm going to click on our paragraph icon. I'm going to call this caption align left, and we'll begin working through some of these options. So we'll come up here to our font, and I do want my font to be a Sans font. So I'm going to do Source Sans Pro. I'll scroll down here till I find Source Sans Pro. There we go. And the next option I want to change, I want to make sure the font size is set to 9 point. We'll go ahead and change that. Continuing to work through the leading value, I want to make sure it's set at 12 points. So I'm going to do leading exactly 12 point, just to make sure we have that configured properly. And I also want to make the font to be bold. We'll set that as bold. And this would basically be our default caption styling for left alignment. Now I'm going to quickly duplicate this. So to do that, I'm going to just drag this down. And I'll go ahead and duplicate this style here, like left clicking on the hamburger icon, and duplicate our caption align left and change this to be caption align right. We'll come down here to our spacing options. And for the alignment, I want to make sure this is set to right. Apply it to the selection. And now we have our align right captions and our align left captions. I can now go ahead and click OK. And now we have both of our captions here set up. I'll go ahead and move this up here. Over here we have our base body copy. And I can go ahead and get rid of this one for now. And we'll just go ahead and drag these over here and clean this up just a little bit. Okay, so continuing on, the next thing I would like to create is basically going to be a caption first line style. And what I would like to do for that is I would like to have the first line of the caption have a color fill background. So how do we create that? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're simply going to have our base style selected. And I'm going to drag in a text frame here and make sure this is set to base by default. And I will just put in here first caption line for testing. Okay, so now let's begin styling this. So to style this, I'm going to make a new paragraph style. And I will go ahead and name this caption first line fill. For the font, since we did make this based on the base style, I do want to make this, of course, the Source Sans format. So we'll scroll down here to Source Sans. I also want to come down here to, let's see what the next option. I want to do capitals. I want to make this all caps. And I also forgot to change this to be bold. Since it's part of the captions, we're going to make sure it's also bold to match these. And scrolling down here, I want to add in the background fill essentially for this paragraph style. Now, how can we achieve that? We do that actually underneath the decorations option. So we click on decorations, You'll see the decorations here, and we have an enable checkbox. Let's go ahead and enable the decorations. And these will all highlight so we can now fill these out. And you'll see we can apply a border to the left, to the top, to the right, to the bottom. I want to do a fill. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the fill option. And now you'll see we have a light gray fill behind our caption text here, which is a start of what I'm looking for. But we can also notice a couple of things not quite looking right. You'll see that the caption, or the background fill rather, drops down a little bit below, but not so much to the top. And we also have it hugging right up against the left and right up against the right. Now, what I would like to do is basically offset these a little bit. And we do that by setting our indentation options. So for the indentation options, the first one I'm going to change is the left. And I'm going to change this to be minus 0.042 and see how that looks. So it's probably hard to see on screen, but that brought it out just a little bit from our first character, and it looks pretty even with the bottom here. Let's go ahead and try that same setting on the top. And there our top is lining up pretty good. And we'll do the same for the right. And that's looking pretty good. So right now we have our background fill for our first line of our captions. It's just to give an extra styling here and there throughout our publication. We wouldn't use this all the time, but it might be a nice flair to add two different and specific situations where we want to add a little bit more flair to our layout. And let's continue up here. Now what I would like to do is go ahead and change this fill background color to be black. So I'm going to select black for my swatches. And now we can't see our text. So how do we fix that? We just come up underneath our font menu, or rather color and decorations, and let's change our font to be white. And there we go. We have our first line caption set up and ready to go. I'll go ahead and select OK. Now keep in mind, we're setting the foundation for our paragraph styles. We will be coming into these later and modifying these ever so slightly. As we see, we run into other issues moving forward. But this will give us a good foundation and a good starting point to set up our next styles to once again chain all of our styles together. So we can say next style, we go from header to subheader to body copy in one continuous chain when we're bringing in our copy to quickly style our publication. That's the whole purpose of setting the foundation from the start. So we now have our caption set up. Now the last style I'm going to set up is going to be our drop cap. And the drop cap is pretty straightforward. I'm going to just go ahead and get, let's go ahead and get our base copy here. It doesn't matter which one we do. I'm just going to do a quick Control C or Command C and paste this since I'm down here. That's just easier than dragging and dropping in this instance. And now what I would like to do is add a drop cap style. So with our base style selected, the only thing we're going to do is click New Paragraph, have base selected. We'll call this drop cap. And we're going to scroll down here to our drop cap option. So here's our drop caps, and right now it's disabled. We want to make sure we go ahead and enable this. And it's going to give us a base drop cap. Now the height in lines, I would like to go ahead and change this to be 6. Now it's not going to show up. I'm going to have to expand this text frame just a little bit. But you'll kind of see why I'm doing that a little bit later. It's just for stylization purposes. Now you may not want to have a drop cap that big, and that's perfectly fine. You can go ahead and make it whatever you want to for the lines. I'm going to start with 6. I may go to 5, may go to 4. We'll kind of see how the publication throws, or flows rather, as we're going through it. Because like I said, I'm creating this in real time with you. So that's so you can experience all the ins and outs of creating a publication. Now we can select the number of characters we want. Right now, set to 1. But if you want to do 2, you can do 2. Or you can do 1. I'm just going to leave it set at 1 for now. And distance to text, I do want to go ahead and choose align the left edge. And what that does, you may not have noticed if I uncheck that here again real quick, see if it goes back. It's moving this text over to be flush against the left side of our text frame, which is what I want. I do want to make sure I do have that enabled. Let me go ahead and click that here if I can get my mouse on it. There we go. And I do want to go ahead and scale for descenders as well. for like J's or anything that has a descender coming down. That's going to give us flexibility that way and scale it accordingly. Now, for a style, we can add a style if we want to color the drop cap a different color, maybe red, maybe green. Since I don't have the color palette yet, I'm not going to set that up at this point. But the odds are I will be having a color for our paragraph style, or rather for the drop cap, but we'll add that later on. And the distance to the text, you can modify this ever so slightly. And what that's going to do, if you notice, now obviously if you click these arrows, it's going to get pretty drastic. So I usually recommend, start out pretty small, in small increments. Maybe I'll do 0.002, and that's going to help space this out a little bit in here. So it's not hugging right up against your character. And we'll probably fine tune this later in another video as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And that's essentially going to bring us to the end of setting up our paragraph styles. We'll set up the character styles in coming videos. Those are a lot more straightforward because typically when I'm working with character styles, I'm doing nothing more than changing colors or something along those lines. They're usually very basic when I'm doing my character styles. So we'll get those set up as we need them in the future videos. I thank you for your time and joining me for this session. And once again, if you found this helpful at all, please give a like or subscribe. Any support you can give is greatly appreciated. Help a designer out. I know your time is very valuable, and I do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend it with me. This is Nick for TDG. We'll see you in the next episode.